I've been wanting to make this video for a very long time, but this format, my experience with Christianity stuff, has been a lot more difficult recently because I'm just so far removed from that sort of thing. But this topic has affected me even up until recently. In fact, the main reason I haven't really talked about this topic is that I haven't even gotten over it myself. Like, it still affects me, and for everything else that I talked about in my experience with Christianity series, it's been stuff that I've either been over completely or didn't affect me because of Christianity, right? So like the gender episode, it took a while after that video came out to realize that I was a trans woman, right? At the time, I just knew that I wasn't a cis man. But the only way I could have realized that I wasn't a cis man was to be entirely removed in that concept, at least from Christianity. But for this one, like even now, I am removed from Christianity, but that sense of the purity culture, right, that still affects me daily, even. Now, it's been a lot easier to get over it than I think it would have been in other circumstances. Like, for instance, I am poly, right? I'm with several other people. I still get insanely jealous sometimes because of purity culture. But overall, this attraction to multiple people has forced me to get over my jealousy, basically. Because, like, I do genuinely love these people. And I'm not just going to stop loving them and be able to focus on one of them. That's just not how my brain works. But the purity culture itself has still made this whole process way harder than it needs to be. I don't know if it would have been any easier if I wasn't a Christian, though, right? Because the entire concept of purity culture permeates all of, you know, American life in general. Like, secular people villainize sex and sex work all the time, regardless of religious affiliation. And that's kind of the crux of the issue, right? So sex isn't a bad thing. And I think saying that sex is a bad thing is very telling of either how you grew up or your viewpoint. Like, if you only think that because of how you grew up, that sucks, right? And I'm not saying that those people should be demonized, but the people who say that it's bad regardless of how they grew up, right? Like, if they say, you know, sex is between a man and a woman, or sex is something that's only between two people, it's intimacy. That's not inherently true. Like, I understand, and I really don't want this to be misconstrued. People who are monogamous, who don't want friends with benefits, who want a very closed relationship, that's fine. That's good even, right? If that makes you happy, that's awesome. Do that. But for the majority of people who don't think like that, right, who who can have friends with benefits, who can have casual sex, platonic sex even, I don't know if platonic and sexual are two separate modes of attraction, right? Can you have platonic sex, or is it just sexual? Because, like, platonic and platonic relationships and romantic relationships. Or, anyway, my point is, casual sex is a thing, right? And demonizing that makes it seem like you are for most people, at least for most men in my experience, anecdotally, it's because they're insecure. That's how it was for me a lot after getting out of purity culture in general. I had a lot of insecurities. Even outside of that, though, those were strengthened by purity culture. Just like, I should probably get into my experience part, but I just really want to hammer home that purity culture is bad, right? Even outside of Christianity, or like even in Christianity, right? It causes a lot of problems. Abstinence-only sex education is obviously a bad thing. And not exploring sex can, like, outside of your romantic relationships, can make romantic relationships where your partner and you aren't super sexually compatible. It can make those really difficult. So regardless of your religiosity, whatever, if you think that purity culture is good, or if you think that sex deserves the stigma that it has around it, that it has no place in public, and everyone should stay away from it unless it's in the privacy of their own home, that's wrong. That's just not how it should work, right? That viewpoint leads to a lot of negative things in the world. I had a hard time being in relationships as a Christian because of purity culture. Like, obviously, I would want to be in a one-on-one monogamous relationship without cheating. On top of that, there was the whole, like, a man is the head of the household, being a cis man, or I thought I was a cis man at the time, so I would take that on and I would act like my dad. My dad is a terrible person. That I can go into that at another time. But my dad was very controlling of my mother and of the household as a whole. He was very stubborn, and he was stupid in a way that I thought was smart. Because he was stubborn, right? He would refuse to move on his viewpoints, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when it's tied up in being narcissistic and controlling, that sucks, right? And I would be very controlling with the few partners that I had as a Christian. Like, I don't want to get too deep into what happened, but my first partner that I can remember off the top of my head that I would consider like a real partner, like obviously I dated people and dated quote unquote people in like middle school, right? But that doesn't count. That's not what I'm talking about. I dated a girl in high school, and we broke up like a month later because she had to move. That doesn't count. We barely even talked. But the first proper relationship that I considered at the time to be a proper relationship that I wanted to carry forward into the rest of my life. I was very controlling. I was not nice to her. I thought I was. I thought I was taking the role that I was expected to take. Being very controlling and very, like, you do this because it's good for you. It's for your own good. I'm doing this because I love you, sort of thing, right? Even as a parent, that's a terrible way to treat your children. But bad things happened, and I did not respond in the way that I should have. And I really don't know how much to get into because I want to get this point across, but I don't want this video to be brought down. Bad things happened. I didn't respond how I should have, and it tied into purity culture, which really just got into my insecurities also. Terrible thing. And that really, I don't want to say that it caused my depression, but definitely sparked it in a way that nothing else had before. So like, I have a lot of brain problems, right? ADHD, autism, OCD, whatever. And I was undiagnosed. So I also had depression at the time. I mean, I still do, obviously. I'm clinically depressed. It's not like a mood thing. But I had moved from the middle of a town, basically, to a super rural place when I went to high school. So I was going to a new school with new people, no friends around anywhere. And that really sucked. But after, the first school year, I had a few friends. I had a lot of experiences with people there, and I was used to living there. I was still depressed, but it wasn't awful. And then that happened, and I was really depressed for a very long time after that. And I don't want to say I would try to fill that with relationships, because that's not what happened. That relationship was in sophomore year of high school. I was 15. And then I went into junior year. I ended up being in a relationship with a senior. She was 17, I was 16. Nothing crazy. And she wasn't a Christian at the time, I don't think. But a lot of my behavior was still dependent on me being Christian, right? Because I was still Christian at the time. I was still very controlling. I'm not sure what it was, but even by the time that we broke up, she was still wanting to be with me, which I don't understand to this day. She got really upset when I broke up with her, which is understandable, obviously, but she got genuinely mad at me, which I don't understand. You know what? Thinking back on it, maybe I do understand. That's not the point. I'll tell that story in a minute. I actually lost my virginity to her. It was prom night, and we lived on the beach, right? It was on the Oregon coast. We were in a town that was on the beach, and the place where prom was the city hall. And the city hall was like a 5-10 minute walk from the beach. So we went to the beach in the middle of the night on a prom night, hidden in the bushes. And yeah, so like, it's awesome to say that I lost my virginity on a beach. It sounds super romantic and whatever. It was awful. It was terrible. Sand everywhere. It was uncomfortable. It was cold. Don't do it on a beach. It's not worth it. But like outside of that, in my mind, that was me saying like, hey, I'm giving myself to you. This is something that I hold very dearly, right? Like my purity, quote unquote, which is a terrible way to put it. There's nothing special to virginity. In fact, I had to take a break there because people were being loud in this house. Anyway, I think saying losing your virginity at all is a really weird way to phrase it, and I don't think it encapsulates how it should be treated. Something like just like having sex for the first time makes a lot more sense than saying losing your virginity to me. Anyway, so that person, I think, ended up being mad at me because they didn't like another girl that I was with, or that so there was another girl who I talked to because she was in my choir class, and the girl I was dating didn't like her because, not because, but she also disliked her even more because she was worried that I would have gone, or that she was going to quote unquote steal me from her, which is kind of exactly what happened. I broke up with her so that I could date the other girl. And like, you know, high school kids do, we sent pictures to each other. Very much not pure quote unquote pictures. And at the time, I thought it was okay because, oh, I'm expecting to be with this person for the rest of my life, so this isn't bad. This isn't a sin, right? Because like I expect to be with them forever. I was terrible to this person. Their sibling, I don't know their siblings' pronouns, but they were not cis, right? In fact, I think they were transmasc. But of course, being Christian at the time, I was just an absolute ass about that. And I really don't know why she spent as long as she did with me. It was only a few months, but still, I would have broken up with me day one. And then, you know, after all that, around the time we broke up was when I moved away from my parents' house, and that's where all the other, like, my experience with Christianity videos just kind of fell apart, or just kind of happened. Like, all my faith fell apart, and it all just kind of bled into me being here now. But that purity culture just stuck with me. That jealousy, that even to like being controlling. The monogamy was really, really hard to get past. It took me 2 years to get past that, even though I kind of always leaned more towards polygamy. Or not polygamy, polyamory. Sorry. Very, very different things in terms of like cultural significance. But the more I got away from that purity culture mindset, the more the more I started realizing how much purity culture really influences basically all of America, regardless of religious affiliation. Like, what really brought it to a head in my mind, or made me really want to make this video, was how, like, the recent Twitch debacle, right? How there were people making quote, or they were taking advantage of the new guidelines that said you could have artistic nudity. And that idea, the idea of artistic nudity is so strange to me, because isn't all nudity artistic in some way? Like, or how I've heard it, the delineation between artistic nudity and otherwise is eroticism. But can eroticism not be artistic? I mean, obviously I can't think of any off the top of my head. I'm not that invested in, like, proper art. I don't know. I'm not invested in like the kind of stuff you would see in museums, but there's plenty of museums that have erotic art up, right? Like, there's a museum exhibit that has literal actual penises, and whether or not you want to say that's erotic, either way, it can be seen as erotic, which is the entire point of art, right? So is not all art, is not all nudity artistic in some way? I would say wearing clothes is an artistic decision, right? Obviously not in terms of like day-to-day life. You have to wear clothes in a variety of spaces for a variety of reasons. but just the idea that there's some separation between eroticism and art that is necessarily there is absurd to me. If you're making content, you are making art regardless of how erotic it is. And that, like, separation is very much a stigmatization of sex, right? And I mean, lewdness in general, anything having to do with sex, not, it's very stigmatized, which I don't think it deserves to be. And I think that stigmatization is largely stemming from purity culture, if not entirely, right? Because a lot of other places around the world are a lot more open to sex. Like, even the first thing that comes to mind is Japan, right? A lot of their media has a lot more sex in it than most American media. Obviously, American media, or Western media, I guess is a better way to put it. A lot of Western media has, sex scenes, but they're treated as either purely titillating or purely for drama, right? Thinking, my brain immediately goes to Annihilation, where the main character, I don't remember her name at all, it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but she cheats on her husband, and the sex scene there is purely for the drama, right? Then that's an artistic form of lewdness, but the lewdness itself is not the artistry, it's what comes from the lewdness, if that makes sense, right? While in in Eastern cultures, in my experience, obviously I'm not from an Eastern culture, so I can't speak on it that much, but it just seems like they're a lot more okay with accepting nudity itself as the artistry, the lewdness itself. And I don't even mean like Michelangelo's David, obviously that's more of a Western thing, right? And there is that is what would generally be considered artistic nudity, but it's not lewd, right? It's just anatomical. While something like, I don't know, twerking, dance is art, right? I think that's something that we can agree on. Dance is art, twerking is a form of dancing, but people were getting on Twitch for allowing allowing twerking, like compilations, basically, that would be live streamed on their platform. And I mean, there's a difference between uploading a compilation of someone else's work, that's not cool, but saying that twerking itself, which is what most people were, in my experience, were hammering in on, that the twerking itself is the bad part, or even the fact that kids 13 and up are allowed on the platform, all nudity whatsoever should be taken off the platform wholesale, which is absurd to me, right? Kids should know about nudity. They should be able to see these things to destigmatize them, mostly, but also just the fact that, like, people exist as people, right? Everyone looks different under the clothes. I think it would help a lot with body positivity if nudity itself wasn't stigmatized so heavily. There's just so many layers to it, and I'm not saying like I'm gonna go streaking, right? I'm not a nudist or whatever the word is, but I think the idea of nudity, just like people being nude for art on the internet, should be a lot more accepted, and purity culture has made that really, really difficult to do. On top of lewdness being accepted as art, I think that's something that really should be leaned into. And obviously lewdness is a lot more of an adult thing, but kids seeing it isn't unhealthy, and I don't understand where that concept comes from. As a child, I saw a lot of lewdness, but because it was like behind a veil, something that I had to go around my guardians for, it made it a lot less enjoyable, I guess. And I understand that kids aren't supposed to be, looking at lewdness and enjoying it for what it is, but I think the idea of them seeing it as a bad thing is kind of absurd. Especially 13 plus, where you're getting a lot more hormones, and you kind of need to see those sorts of things in a positive light to be able to healthily engage with that part of yourself. Because, I mean, sexuality is a part of who you are. That's completely inseparable from you as a person, right? So there's a lot of layers of this that I can't go into. But the destigmatization of sex, of lewdness, of nudity is something that I see as extremely important for the progression of culture, especially if we want to, and we do. That's not supposed to be a question like that. Because we want to accept more identities, right? Whether it be homosexual or pansexual, whatever. All those identities are necessarily entwined with attraction, but the destigmatization of that would completely remove one of the major arguments that bigots have. And of course, I don't think that argument is valid, and I don't think it's necessary to strip them of this argument to overcome the argument, because it's obviously stupid. Because seeing two men kiss is somehow more inherently sexual than seeing a man and a woman kiss. That's absurd. But if we strip that away from them entirely, then where will they fall back on? And of course, they have places to fall back on. But like a lot of people dislike the pride parades, for instance. I had a coworker who said that pride was bad because some people had like not sex toys, but like things evoking sexual imagery, or even like you see like leather pride flags or pet play pride flags, or that sort of thing. The destigmatization of that would allow them to be more accepted into pride, and I think celebrating all kinds of identities, especially around sex, is extremely important to the development of people as a whole, especially children, obviously, if they see this part of them that they don't have to hide anymore, that they can open up to people about, and those people won't tell them not to because they see it as gross, right? I just think that purity culture as a whole is extremely damaging to everyone, and especially depending on the development of children being hampered by purity, or by the opposite of purity culture, is just absurd and doesn't make much sense to me. Anyway, I guess I don't really have much more to add to than that. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all, and I don't know how to end this.